Hello and welcome to Varsity Conversations. I am here with Sheila Spencer, and Sheila, you are our first interviewee. I don't know how you feel about that.
I'm a guinea pig, it's okay.
We definitely appreciate you volunteering. Being voluntold, I guess. But I've got some questions here, but this is more just some things to fall back on. But I find as I talk to many of our seniors at the church that you know a few people in your Sunday school class and maybe a few that you might sit by in the services. But beyond that, unless you've been here a long time, you don't know that many people. You probably know faces before you know names, and so I get to meet a lot of our seniors. I get to find out all these interesting things about them, and but that's just something that I have, and so I wanted to start this as a way for all of us to get to know one another a little better. And so now after this time of this interview, when you see Sheila, you'll know more about her. She may not know more about you, but you'll be able to strike up maybe a deeper conversation than you would have otherwise. And that's my hope with all of this. And we'll keep doing this as long as I can get people to come in. All right, so Sheila, let's start off. Just tell us about where you were born and your childhood years growing up.
Okay, I was born in Tennessee. Actually, I was born in Memphis. My daddy was still in the Army at the time, on his way home because he had been seriously wounded in the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, wow.
My mother said I was 3 months old when he finally was able to get home. Funny story, one of the first things he did, of course, was pick me up and hold me and drop me because his right arm was in a cast. We then moved, after he got out of the military, moved to Chattanooga, which is where we lived until I was about 12. He was a school teacher, and we moved to South Florida, and that's where I actually grew up, in Boca Raton.
So your dad was drafted, not necessarily enlisting in the Army, but
he was drafted into the Army, and wasn't in there very long before he was seriously wounded and sent home.
Did those injuries affect him the rest of his life?
Oh, absolutely. He lost most of the use of his right arm. The nerves were seriously injured. He was hit by shrapnel. It's a miracle that he lived. God had to be in that because it was snowing in Germany at the time, laid in a ditch for, they're not sure how long, but some period of time. Should have bled to death, but they said that the cold probably prevented that. And so he was able to survive and get home, and wonderful Christian man. I was very blessed to be born into a strong Christian home.
Fantastic. So he taught what age level?
Elementary school, mostly 5th grade. Actually, his first job, though, was as a principal in a country school in Deer Lodge, Tennessee. I can begin to tell you exactly where that was. Principal and taught 12th grade at the same time. I was 5 at the time, started kindergarten there at that little country school, and then we moved, I guess that was in between moving to Chattanooga, and then he always taught elementary school after that.
Okay, so eventually from Chattanooga to Boca Raton.
Yes.
All right, so who was someone outside of your immediate family that maybe had a big impact on you as a young person?
One of our pastors, when I was young teenager, and then into the youth group, Dr. Turlington. Henry Turlington. We went to First Baptist Church in Delray, which was Boynton, Delray, and Boca were all kind of together at the time. And Dr. Turlington was a wonderful, godly man, and just, really was involved. He had sons in the youth, and so he was very involved with us as young people. And I always think fondly about him and what a godly man he was.
Great. So what sort of play or activities or games did you enjoy as a child?
When we first lived in Chattanooga, one of the houses that we lived in was at the foot of Missionary Ridge. If anybody knows anything about Civil War history, there was a major battle on Missionary Ridge in Chattanooga. And there was a little backyard, and then it went straight up the side of the hill to the top, up to Missionary Ridge. And we played in those woods. That was pretty much our activity, was just roaming the woods. Bicycles, of course, we ran all over. Back then, kids could do that, could roam the neighborhood, ride our bicycles wherever we wanted to go, and
I remember those days.
a lot of freedom.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your salvation experience. What led up to it? Was it at home or church or a vacation Bible school or a revival? Or tell us about that.
As I said before, I was raised in a godly family. Daddy was a deacon. He and my mom actually helped start a small church up there when we were living in Deer Lodge. So anybody that's my age knows I was started out in cradle roll. We were always at church, all the church things. I was involved in all the kids' activities and whatnot. And so I don't think there was a particular moment. I was sitting in church one Sunday morning, and when the invitation was given, I just felt that was the next thing I was to do.
Well, that sounds like a moment to me.
And so I went forward, made a profession of faith, and was baptized at 8 years old. And our family continued in the same vein at church every time the doors opened. We were one of those families. All through high school, in the youth group. Went to college locally, so I lived at home while I was in college. And then I graduated from college and moved out. And then I did what a lot of young people do. I got way off track and doing my own thing. And at some point, the little church that my parents went to was having a revival, which I did not attend because I didn't need to go. Obviously, I was doing well. And they kept pestering me to go, and so I wanted to please them, so I went. Well, there was a young team doing the revival, and believe it or not, at the end of the first week, which was the scheduled time, they said, we feel really strongly led to extend. I went the last night just to please my parents. We feel really strongly led to extend this for another week. And it hit me like a lightning bolt. God said, this is for you. And it was at that point, I went the whole next week, every night, and made another commitment. And that's when things got back on track for me. I think up to that point, I have no doubt in my mind that when I made that decision at 8 years old, it was real. Mm-hmm. But I was 24 years old, I guess, at the revival, and that really made it real for me. And I met Dan after that, my husband, and things really started to fall into place because I was doing what God wanted me to do at that point.
It's amazing how that corresponds.
It is, yes. Things just got better.
All right, so you mentioned Dan. So how did you meet Dan, and what attracted you to him?
We lived in the same apartment complex, two buildings with a pool in between. And of course, I saw him. He lived in the other building, but I had my eye out. And I kind of chased him till he caught me. I would make sure I would be at the pool when he came. He worked construction at the time, so his first thing he did when he got home from work was hit the pool. So I made sure to be at the pool a lot. And we got acquainted, and one of the first things that, in one of our conversations, he asked me about church, and I told him that I was going to I'd gone back to the little church my parents went to, and he asked if he could come to church with me. And that kind of sealed the deal right there.
Oh, I'm telling you. There you go. Well, you mentioned college. What were you majoring in, and where did you go?
I went to Palm Beach Junior College, got my AA degree, and then I went to Florida Atlantic University for a bachelor's. My dad was a school teacher, so it was always assumed that I would go become a school teacher. And I started out in that, that's my declared major, but it didn't take me very long to realize that isn't me. And so then it's like, okay, what next? Well, I didn't have a goal in mind, but I love history. I've always loved history. So I majored in history, which basically was a Bachelor of Arts degree, with no idea what I was going to do with it. But I have a degree in history.
Well, in my experience, it's like there's nothing that you experience in your life that God can't use later on. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of my job, I always had clerical positions when I was worked in a bank and a real estate office, places like that. But I think having a degree was instrumental in getting some of those positions because people look at that as an accomplishment.
Well, it is an accomplishment. And,
so even though it didn't do me any good, really.
All right. So you mentioned the different jobs you've done. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about children. How many children do you have, and do you have some funny stories you can share with us?
I have 4 kids. They're all grown. I have 3 sons, the 3 oldest, and then my daughter is the youngest.
All right, and they are?
Jason is the oldest. He is a policeman in Fort Worth, Texas, has 5 children. Joshua is the second oldest. He just retired from the Navy. It was a year ago. It was last March. He has 3 sons. He's still trying to figure out what he wants to do next. John is number 3. He lives in Joshua is right now in Virginia. John is in LaGrange, Georgia. He was a music minister for 10 years. And then he and his wife were led into ministry at a home for children as house parents.
Okay.
Did that for several years. My daughter-in-law then got leukemia and passed away.
Oh,
it's been 2 years now.
Goodness.
So he couldn't do that anymore. So he's a school teacher now. But he's also an assistant music minister at a church. He's continuing with his music. And then Jennifer is in North Carolina. They're in 4 different states. She's in North Carolina. She's not married. Oh, John has 2 little kids. She, highly intelligent young lady, has a degree from Florida Southern University,
Mm-hmm.
a degree in finance and accounting. Worked at Duke University for several years, managing a $5 million grant for AIDS research.
My goodness.
And then she decided it was too much stress. She just couldn't do it anymore, so she quit that job, worked part-time, went to school to become a hairdresser.
Well, you've got a big family.
Yes.
Any funny stories you can share?
Funny stories. There's always something funny at our house. of course, Jennifer, being the youngest and the only girl, was, in her brother's eyes, spoiled rotten. She's the princess at our family. They were all required to do, had chores to do. And we had a calendar who signed what. And as they got older, the boys, especially in the summer, had part-time jobs. But Jennifer, being younger, didn't work, and so she didn't have any income. They had some spending money, but she didn't. So she made a deal to do their chores for them, and they'd pay her.
That's an enterprising.
She's enterprising.
Yes.
The other funny story is that John and, well, all three boys can imitate pretty much anybody they want to. And so our answering machine was changed constantly. And you never knew who was going to answer the phone. Sometimes it was Yoda.
Yoda, okay.
Sometimes it was Crocodile Dundee. We never knew. And they kept us entertained at the dinner table always.
It's amazing impersonations.
Yes.
By the Spencer boys. Okay. Have you ever had any run-in with a celebrity?
I have.
Okay.
I met President Johnson. He came to the inauguration, or the opening of Florida Atlantic University. My mother was working there at the time in the public relations office, and so she was involved somewhat in all that was required to have him on campus. And so I was with her when he came, and I got to meet him, shook hands with him.
Oh, wow.
Also met actor Dale Robertson. I don't know if anybody my age would remember who he is. Western actor who I thought was just to die for. And he was at a horse show. My mother used to put on horse shows. And he was at a horse show that we were at, and I got to meet him.
As I think back, I did have a brush with a political figure.
Mm-hmm.
I had entered a contest in high school it was really for all the congressional districts around the country. I won from my district, so my artwork got to go and hang in a hallway at the congressional building. And they had a ribbon cutting ceremony to open up the art exhibit. And I got to meet Tip O'Neill.
Really?
Speaker of the House. And
That's cool.
that's my only one I could think of. So anyway.
I did go to school. I went to college with Dan Micah, who is the brother of John Micah, who is a representative or something from this area. I forget
really?
which he may not still be, but he was for years, was in Congress from this area. Forgot about Dan.
What were you doing when you got the news that President Kennedy had been shot?
I was in my first year of college at Palm Beach Junior College, and I had gone. My dad was teaching school there in Delray Beach, and I had, for whatever reason, had to go by the school on my way home, and it was on the way there that I had the radio on and heard it. And so then I just went to the school and parked and sat there because it was such a shock that. And what do you do at that point?
Right. You know, how does this happen in the United States?
And what do we do now?
Let's talk about Christmas for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite time of the year. Did your family have any special Christmas traditions, things that you enjoyed doing every year?
Yeah, we decorated the tree together once the kids were big enough not to destroy it.
Did you do that after Thanksgiving?
Yes. We got our Christmas tree the weekend after Thanksgiving always.
Real or artificial?
Always had a real tree. Went, together to pick out a tree. Decorated it together. We, as Christmas got closer, Christmas Eve, of course we always had Christmas Eve services at church, and we always attended those. Dan would read the Christmas story. We had lots of CDs of Christmas music, which we played all the time, when we're decorating the tree and all through the holidays. I still have some of those CDs, 20 years old or more. Always hot chocolate and cookies or something on Christmas Eve while we're doing whatever. Eggnog. Oh, my kids would kill for eggnog. I never liked it, but we had to have eggnog.
I'm not a fan, but they loved it, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And
Still do.
You could take it or leave it.
I leave it.
All right. Tell us about a favorite family vacation that when you think back, this was just really memorable.
We didn't do vacations regularly like some folks. When we got married, backing up to when we got married, we discussed how we would live life, and one of the things that we both agreed on was that when we had children, I would not work anymore. And so we did that. I stayed home with the children, and so we never had a lot of extra funds to take vacations. Two that we did, and one was when Jason was an infant. We went to the Keys and camped. Dan was a big camper. We did that, but
now when you say that makes me think you're not a big camper.
I prefer hotels, frankly, but it was okay.
Yeah.
We did that quite a bit. Later on, we got a camper and went a couple of times with the kids, and it was good. But the one that I can really remember, I think, was kind of out of the ordinary for us, because the other times was something we could do that was cheap.
Right.
We went to, believe it or not, to Chattanooga, and traveled around and went to some of the battlefields. The kids were old enough to appreciate that. We went to Chickamauga,
Mm-hmm.
and up into the mountains, and just did touristy stuff. Went to Gatlinburg and bought the kids headdresses.
Yeah, those Cherokee
Yeah.
Indian headdresses. So yeah.
that one was good. That's probably the most memorable with all the family.
That's fun. Have you ever traveled outside of the United States?
No.
No.
Have not. Haven't been too many places in the United States.
Any special awards or achievements that you've earned, either high school, college, or as an adult?
The only awards that I ever remember really getting, I used to show horses, and I have some trophies and ribbons from that. When I was working, one of my last jobs that I had outside the home was working in the Ola Mills Portrait Studio as an appointment secretary. And every year I won an award for meeting quota, Secretary of the Year. I won that several times.
Nice.
In our district.
Now, when you talk about the horses, were you riding the horses? Mm-hmm. You were an equestrian.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Did you ever play any type of organized sports?
I'm a little klutzy. I did play on the softball team in middle school, but I never did any other organized.
What position did you play?
When I would let me in the game, I played shortstop mostly.
Shortstop. That's
Yeah.
an important
I bowled
position.
on a bowling league.
Did you?
Yes.
What's your high game?
I actually got up to where I could bowl up in the 200s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Better than me, for
every
sure.
every once in a while.
Are you Florida State, or another school?
I'm not too keen on any of them, honestly.
Are you afraid to declare?
I'm a professional football person. I never.
You're all right, NFL.
Okay. For years and years and years, I followed the Dolphins because we lived in South Florida and they were doing really well. I'm kind of a fair weather fan. I stuck with them for a long time, even when they weren't doing well. I was at, the Bob Greasy era, Larry Zonka and all that bunch, and that was exciting. I even went to several of the games in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I kind of lost interest. I just like a really good game. I'm not so big. I have some teams I don't like, but I just like to see a really good football game.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't watch them anymore since I'm by myself because it's not fun by yourself.
No, there's always that one person that you enjoy watching a football game
Yeah.
with. For me, it's my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite foods, things you just enjoy. Maybe whether you get them often or not, you just when you have that plate in front of you, just really savor it.
I'm pretty ecumenical when it comes to food.
You'll take it all. Anything that doesn't eat you first.
Seafood.
Okay.
I see food. I like it.
What's been the greatest tragedy in your life?
Probably losing Dan.
Yeah.
Um,
And for those that may not know, how long ago was that?
It'll be 3 years in July. It was very sudden, very unusual, which made it harder. I mean, it wasn't like a long, lingering illness or anything. It,
You had no time to prepare.
nope. And it was such a very rare disease, something nobody had ever even heard of. The doctors hadn't heard of it, some of them. So it was like, okay, somebody think of something to do, but nobody could. There was no cure, no treatment, no cure.
What time frame from?
6 weeks
6 weeks. Wow.
from the first symptom to when he passed. Just about 6 weeks.
Was his lifestyle pretty healthy?
Absolutely. He had been in for a physical about a year before this, and his doctor told him he was one of the healthiest 70-year-old men he'd ever met. Strong heart. He was strong as an ox. That was one problem we had when he was going through this, because it's very much like dementia, so he wasn't aware of what he was doing. And I had warned anybody that was taking care of him not to let him grab hold of him, because his grip was so strong you couldn't get loose if he did. And it hurt. There was a time or two where he grabbed my hand and it, I finally got loose, but it was painful. But he was obsessive about eating healthy. He never smoked, didn't drink, ate healthy, good food, kept his weight down, and just extremely healthy lifestyle. So that's the other thing that made it so weird.
Right.
Because it wasn't like, well, he, had this issue or that issue, and no, he was completely healthy.
And having walked through that time, what did the Lord teach you through that?
Just hold on. Hold on. One day at a time. And honestly, it's been 3 years. There's still days when it's hard. But God's so good. He's so gracious. If I hadn't had this family here at Stetson, I don't know if I'd have made it. And they are my family. Because my kids they all were here. The boys, Jennifer was here the whole time. But the boys came early on when, we knew how bad it was. They even sent Joshua's in the Mediterranean on an aircraft carrier. Red Cross got him home. They were here, and through the funeral and stayed, for a little while. But they had lives. They had families.
Sure.
They had to go back to.
Can only stay so long.
Right. And so, really, my Stetson family was so critical at that time. Just women called and said, "Let me take you to lunch," and we, just call and check on me, and it's just wonderful. I don't know what I would have done without them. I tell people that, people that are new in town or new to a place, you've got to get involved. You've got to make friends at church. That's so critical. I don't know how people get through it that don't have that support.
Having gone through that, what keeps you going every day?
I just get up and do what, honestly, I gotta be real honest here. There are days when I don't get out of my pajamas.
I think we all have those.
I get up and I putz around. I'm a reader. Two Christmases ago, I gave myself for Christmas a Kindle. I've never had a Kindle before. Loved going to the library and wandering the shelves and checking out books. But that Christmas I decided to buy a Kindle. Thankfully, because March the world stopped spinning. So anyway, I read voraciously for hours on end. I get lost in a book and hours pass by. But I get out and I shop. I'm a shopper, a looker. I work in the food pantry, so that takes up some time. I've been back and forth to see some of my kids from time to time.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, very important question that a lot of couples struggle with out there, and so that is, does the toilet paper roll off the top or the bottom?
Mine rolls off the top.
Okay.
And don't you put it the other way.
All right, tell me about hobbies. I know you like to read.
Reading and shopping.
Reading and shopping. Very good. And you mentioned that your children are in 4 different states.
Yes.
North Carolina, Georgia,
Virginia,
and
Texas.
And how often do you get to see them?
I see Jennifer more than any of the others. I actually can drive. It takes me 2 days to get there, but I drive up to see her from time to time. I've been to John's place a couple of times. It's a fairly easy drive. The last 2 Thanksgivings, Jennifer and I went to Joshua's for Thanksgiving. She and I went to Texas 2 Christmases ago. Spend Christmas with Jason. But not as often as I would like. It's just prohibitive to...
Sure, that's a big distance.
It is, and to see Jason is always a flight. And I'm getting to the point where driving those distances is not what I want to do.
Do they take turns coming to you for the holidays, or?
No, they don't really. No, nobody comes here for Christmas. I usually go to them. Mm-hmm. The last 2 Christmases, because Jennifer's by herself and I'm by myself, and she was a daddy's girl. So we knew Christmas was going to be really tough. So the first Christmas she and I went to St. Augustine over Christmas, spent several days over there. And then we went to Texas the next Christmas. And this Christmas, we couldn't figure out what we could do because who knew what was open or what there was to do.
Yeah.
So we rented a condo in Daytona and it was the coldest, the worst possible time
Just a
to be on
miserable
the beach.
weekend.
But we have such a good time. She's my best friend, and we have a ball together, so it was okay.
That's awesome. What would you consider your proudest achievement?
I'd like to say my kids, but I don't really think that's an achievement of mine. God has done wonderful things with all those kids, and I don't know that I can take that much credit for it. But it's a legacy,
It is.
and they are all Christians, all professing Christians.
What a blessing, what a comfort.
Jason has talked about going ahead and getting his doctorate and wants to teach at the seminary level. He's a teacher at heart. Joshua, who knows what he'll end up doing. John, of course, is a music minister, and Jennifer, I got to tell you this: for the longest, she did what I did. She graduated from college, moved away, got involved in living her life, and got totally away from church or anything. It's really hard for a young professional now to find a suitable place to go to at church. Most churches don't have classes for that age and
Very
activities for them. And the church that she goes to J.D. Greer's church in Raleigh, Durham.
Mm-hmm.
Huge church. They have satellite churches everywhere, but they don't have Bible study. They do, but not on Sunday. They have it in homes. And so for a single person to go to this home or that home and try to find where you fit is very difficult. So for years she didn't do that, and she has now made good friends, church friends, goes to a Bible study, and has gotten back involved in church. So got it. He said, if you train them the way they go, they won't depart from it. And he's brought her back.
Yeah.
And I can see a big difference. Now we can have those conversations about God. Used to put her off a little bit, and it's like we're preaching to her, and she didn't want to hear it. Yeah, no, I know. That attitude. And now we can have those talks again.
That's great. That's great. And we'll end with this. What's your favorite Bible verse and why?
Yeah, I said I'd have a hard time with that one because there's so many. And I don't know that I have a favorite one, only one.
Give me a top three.
Making this really hard for me. Oh my goodness. Of course, I love the 23rd Psalm, as everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in YWAs, which most people don't know what that is, we had to memorize, is it the 53rd chapter of Isaiah?
Yes.
I love that one. And also when I was a young adult, I was in the choir, and we did a Christmas cantata one year, and we sang Luke, the Christmas story.
Oh, wow.
And I still hear the music in my mind when somebody's reading it. I can sing it, and I love it. So, those are three that they're special to me.
Yeah, there was a Steve Green children's musical out a couple decades ago that was about scripture memorization. And so when I hear, do everything without complaining or arguing so that you may become children of God, I sing the song in my head.
Yeah, it sticks with you. It's amazing.
Well, Sheila, thank you for letting me put you on the spot like this, and this will
Glad to do it.
hopefully, be the first of many as we go forward. And I think people really are going to love this. So.
Well, for the next person that comes in, it's very painless. Don't be afraid to come.
All right, thank you. Let me pray for us and we'll be done. Father, thank you for Sheila and for Dan and for their children and the life that you have created here through them and the legacy that Sheila is being able to reap as she sees her children and grandchildren being taught the ways of the Lord. And it's just a blessing to see how obedience is just like a snowball effect. It just keeps getting bigger and stronger. And thank you for that wonderful testimony. And thank you for this time just to get to know Sheila a little bit better. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.